A girl was born in 1845 in the small town of Dean in rural Wiltshire. The Ripper's first victim, Mary Ann Nichols. Welcome to our channel Dark Deeds, where we discuss and dissect the most mysterious, terrifying and mind-bending cases from all over the world. We are discuss about one of the most infamous serial killers of all time, Jack the Ripper. In this video, we'll explore who Jack the Ripper was, what crimes he committed, and the lasting impact he's had on popular culture. Let's start with some background on the case. Jack the Ripper was an unidentified serial killer who terrorized the streets of London's East End in the late 1800s. The murders, which occurred between August and November 1888, were particularly gruesome and shocked the world. The victims were all female prostitutes, and they were all killed in a similar manner. Their throats were slashed, and their bodies were mutilated. Despite an extensive investigation and a widespread public outcry, the killer was never caught. To this day, the identity of Jack the Ripper remains a mystery, and his crimes continue to capture the public's imagination. Before we start, we would like to send our condolences to the friends and loved ones who fell victim to the harrowing events described in this case. This information is only for educational purpose. So, let's dive deeper into the crimes themselves. Mary Ann grew up in poverty and had to work as a domestic servant from an early age. She married a printer's machinist, William Nichols, but the marriage failed and she turned to prostitution to make ends meet. On the night of August 31, 1888, a woman is just 43 years old. Mary Ann was seen leaving a pub in Whitechapel. Her body was found the next morning in Bucks Row. She had been killed just hours earlier. Her throat had been slashed twice. Her abdomen had also been cut open, and her internal organs had been removed. She was first victim. Annie Chapman was born Eliza Ann Smith in 1841 in Paddington, West London. She married a coachman, John Chapman, and they had 3 children together. But John died of alcoholism in 1882, leaving Annie destitute. She moved to Whitechapel and turned to prostitution. She was 47 years old. She is second victim. Annie Chapman was killed just over a week later, on September 8, 1888. She was found in the backyard of a house in Hanbury Street, also in Whitechapel. Her throat had been cut, and her abdomen had been opened up. Her uterus and other organs had been removed and taken away from the scene. She was killed just like first victim. Elizabeth Stride was born in Sweden in 1843 and came to London in her 20s. She worked as a domestic servant and a prostitute, and married a coachman named John Stride in 1869. But John died in 1884, and Elizabeth was left alone and destitute. She turned to drink and prostitution to survive. She was 45 years old. Elizabeth Stride is the third victim. She was killed on September 30, 1888. Her body was discovered in Dutfield's Yard, just off Berners Street, also in Whitechapel. Her throat had been cut, but her body had not been mutilated like the previous victims. This has led some investigators to believe that the killer may have been interrupted during the attack. Later that same night, the fourth victim, Catherine Eddowes, was found dead in Mitre Square, also in Whitechapel. Like the other victims, her throat had been cut, and her abdomen had been mutilated. This time, however, the killer had also cut off one of her ears and taken it with him. The final victim, Mary Jane Kelly, was killed on November 9, 1888. Her body was discovered in her room on Dorset Street, Spitalfields. Her body had been mutilated beyond recognition, and her face had been completely destroyed. Her organs had also been removed and placed around the room. Despite an extensive investigation and a number of suspects, the killer was never caught. The police received hundreds of letters and postcards claiming to be from the killer, but the vast majority of them were dismissed as hoaxes. The case remains unsolved to this day. So, what was the impact of Jack the Ripper on popular culture? Well, the case has inspired countless books, movies, and TV shows over the years. From Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes stories to the recent Netflix series The Ripper, the legend of Jack the Ripper has continued to capture people's imaginations. In addition, the case has also had a lasting impact on law enforcement. The investigation into the Jack the Ripper murders was one of the first cases to use forensic evidence, and it helped to establish many of the techniques that are still used today. The case also highlighted the need for improved communication and cooperation between police forces in different areas, and it paved the way for the development of national police forces in many countries. In conclusion, Jack the Ripper was a serial killer who terrorized the streets of London in the late 1800s. The case of Jack the Ripper remains one of the most fascinating and enduring mysteries in criminal history. Despite the passage of more than a century, the killer's identity remains unknown, and the case continues to capture people's imaginations to this day. The brutality and violence of the murders, combined with the killer's elusive identity, have made the case an enduring part of popular culture and a landmark in the history of criminal investigation. While we may never know for certain who Jack the Ripper was, the case remains an important reminder of the need for careful investigation, attention to detail, and the importance of forensic science in solving complex crimes. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video on Jack the Ripper. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them below, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel Dark Deeds for more videos like this one.